I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on setting it up when you're playing with wax. The temptation is to do it in your kitchen because the stove is there and it's easy. But I've done that and it took me weeks to get rid of all the little wax splatters that ended up everywhere. So find yourself a place where it doesn't matter and it's easy to clean up, for example a garage or even outside. And the first thing I've done is used an old cover and I've put that over the surface. And then a broken tile, and this is because the burner can generate a bit of heat. I don't want it to melt anything, and it's just to protect the surface. The burner I'm using is a camping burner, and it is run with a little gas bottle. Butane gas is what it is, and it fits inside here. What's wonderful about this is that it's quick and easy and does give out a really good heat. The other thing you want is an old saucepan. No handle on this one, doesn't matter, because you never ever put wax straight on to the source of heat. Always put water in a pot, saucepan, and then have a dedicated saucepan, which is your wax one. This one will be completely ruined as far as being able to use it for anything else, so I actually went and bought this one from a second-hand shop for $1, and it is my dedicated wax saucepan. The wax I'm using for this project is paraffin wax. Just Google paraffin wax and up will come all sorts of supplies, and you're looking for these beads for this project. Buy 10 kg, 25 pounds, because it will last you a long time and it saves going hunting for another source. The saucepan with the wax, it sits nicely in there when I put the water inside, and it will take just a few minutes to melt. The other thing you need is a stirrer to help with it, and I use a chopstick. So that is the assembly, and it works whether you're using recycled wax or you're using brand new paraffin wax. For this project I'm going to show you how to preserve fruit that in our climate attracts fruit flies within 5 or 10 minutes. The fruit is going to be lemons. Right, so the water, it's boiling water I put in there, and it's just starting to boil. And keep stirring the wax with your chopstick, otherwise it will go into a great big solid lump, and you can see it there starting to melt at the base. We made sure we're in a well ventilated place, and also we have got a wet old towel beside us, so just as a wee bit of a safety issue, if a flame does or wax does get on fire, we can just cover the whole thing with a wet towel before it becomes serious. So, you know, just a few safety precautions. The wax is now melted, and I've only got a couple of centimetres in there because this is just dipping. A lemon is what I want to protect. It works very, very well with any fruit, any vegetables. That's the surface that's going to attract the flies. So using the stem, a quick dip in, pull it out again, and lay it on baking paper, because baking paper has a wax on it, and just leave it there to dry and do the second one. Now this one doesn't have a convenient stem, so put a skewer through there, dip. This photo, you can see this was done in Belgium with capsicums, an enormous amount of capsicums. And have a close look over here. As it dries, it develops its own look. And a close look, you can see that there's 2 or 3 little pieces there where the wax hasn't absorbed. And now that it's lovely and dry, re-dip it so it covers those pieces. I've also got Aralia leaves, and I have graduated them from small to large. Some ivy, and this fabulous plaited reed. Originally it was green. It's one of those treasures that you always have. You can use cane, rattan, some people call it. Instead of that, even rope. Just plait the top of it and then add more and more into the bundle, so you end up with this beautiful roll, and it has been curled up for quite some time. The stand itself is metal with a little bolt welded to the base, and then this big rod going all the way up. And what's that screwed up piece of paper? That's my measurements. I have got 40 centimetres by 40 centimetres square. It's going in the corner of the stand, and it cannot be higher than 140 centimetres. I'm going to put the electrical tape right at the very top of this point. It will hold the washer in place for me. So the washer sits on there. That sits on there. Thread the cable tie through and around. So that's going to keep that really in place there. Now when she carries it, that's not going to come off. I'm going to secure it again with a smaller one, a finer one, down to here, and then swirl the base. So I'm getting this beautiful curve down to the base there, and if you look closely, you'll see those cable ties attaching it, first of all to the bottom of the stand, and the second bundle to the first bundle. Trying to keep it very subtle. The wax is melted in here again, just as we did for dipping, and these Aurelia leaves have been soaked in water. This is to really condition them, because this is the last time I'm going to see water, and just dip the stem into the wax. This has immediately sealed that water source for them, and anything that's in there will stay in there. Aurelia is obviously a long lasting piece of foliage anyway, and that's why I've picked it, but this gives them just a little bit more of an edge. This is done a lot in Belgium and Europe, and Hippeastrum, any big flower, you just want to seal those ends. They've got to be sturdy. Obviously you couldn't do them with tiny little delicate spring flowers, but that's that seal in the end. I'm also going to do with the ivy. The ivy is just as sturdy, designed to last, but it will still benefit from having that wax popped in the end there. Now we start adding the greenery in this paper covered wire, because it's almost the same colour, so it will be quite well hidden. Paper covered wire you can buy in most wholesalers. If you can't find that, raffia will work just as well with this sort of a colour scheme. So I have 5 or 6 pieces of this beautiful long ivy. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes tying them down into place. Everything has to be tied down in place, because obviously this is going to travel with somebody who can't fix it. Now it's the turn of the Aurelia, with a very big one down the bottom here and curving into the line. Making sure I'm still within that little square of 40 centimetres. Attach it in 2 or 3 places, and of course because it's had the wax it doesn't need a water source. I've picked these big bold leaves because they add a nice bold modern look to the arrangement. As soon as you put ivy in, it can tend to look very old-fashioned. And that little top leaf covers that mechanic where we started from, and the other leaves are positioned so they get bigger and bigger as they follow that curve right down to the base. But I don't want to add any more leaves, because we are in danger of covering up that lovely plait. Now to those lemons. I've got a thin piece of decorative wire which will go easily through the lemons, and I'm going to create a garland of them. I've polished all these up, but these are homegrown lemons, they're not out from a grower. And why lemons? Because the show is all about advertising Pyroa, and Pyroa is very, very famous for its lemon drink. In fact, the symbol for the town is an enormous big bottle of this drink, which is called lemon and Pyroa because of the water. That took a bit of doing, but I got there, and looking at the back of it, you can see as I went round, I twisted it around the rod till I got to the bottom, and then twisted it back up to the top again. What the wire has done is cut a little hole in the lemon, so I am going to heat up the wax again and just put a wee dab where the wire has gone into the lemon so that it doesn't attract any insects while it's at the show. And what about these ones that I waxed? The skewer's still in the back. It's going to travel just like this. When they get to the show, I'm going to ask the woman who's in charge to just gently place those in there through the plait so they will sit, and cut off the back so that we're getting the whole lemons, the cut lemons in this section, and at the very bottom just another pile of whole lemons. This design is really cool because it creates an optical illusion that you have put flowers in the middle of a candle somehow. It does require a wee bit of sleuthing. What I've got on here now is the gas, the water bath, and some leftover candle pieces. Ideal for this job. Any candle at all. Don't have to worry about removing the wick or anything. Just put it straight into that middle pot. I've got another one here when that's melted. You'll need 2 containers that are exactly the same in diameter, that one will sit on top of the other. This bottom container is going to have skewers in it, this top container is going to have the wick, and in the middle here is going to be the floral foam. I have sellotaped that little piece there because it protrudes from the bottom and I don't want to have happen. So this is the top one, so that's going to have the wick. Now I got these wicks from candlecreations.co.nz, just Google it, and you pop the wick there and then you tape it in place. I'm just using masking tape. It will come off. Any sturdy type of tape, and tape it into place. The reason I have put these plastic containers inside a ceramic dish is in case it melts. I haven't been able to test it for the degree, so if it melts at least the wax will just go into here. So always sort of think ahead of what would happen if something happened with your wax. Take the wax out. Now there were impurities in there, so I have been taking the impurities out across to here and just pour it in. These were all those candles that were melted. That's as much as I want in there. Now I take a skewer, put the skewer to there, and it holds the wick in place where I want it straight up and down. Now with your chopstick, just give it a little bit of a stir. This is to take the air bubbles out of it, and you leave it like this for 8 hours. It'll take up to 8 hours for that wax. In this one here, I have cut a piece of paper so I can put skewers through. these skewers are going to hold the floral foam in place, which will go on top. So the 3 skewers go in. So there's my little device once I've filled it with wax. Okay, I'm going to put more wax in there. I've got to reheat some more to do it. Before we do that, we need to get the floral foam cut. It's going to be slightly smaller than the outside of the other 2. There's no need to have the floral foam going right to the edge. The flowers will fill up that space. So it's twice as high as the other one. I just wanted to get the proportions right. And we'll cut those to the size we need. So that's the 2 of them done, ready, and that just now gets left until they're both firmly set. 24 hours later, they're out of their moulds. Now, a few tricks. If you have problems getting something out of a mould, the first trick is to put them in the fridge for 20 minutes or more, and that shrinks them down. If you're still having problem, hot water in a sink and leave them there for 2 or 3 minutes and they'll pop out. That's what happened to this one. So it went into the sink and it just slid straight out. It means I can use the moulds again or not. This is the bottom. So onto the bottom we're going to put the foam. I'm just checking, I'm not pushing it on yet because I haven't wet it, but just checking that it's going to be smaller than the size of the container. So we'll wet that. Now it's wet. Push it down onto those. So it goes right the way through. Check. If you need to trim any off, you can see I just need to trim a little bit on this side. There's absolutely no point having floral foam going right to the edges, because you do want the flowers to come in line with the candle. And then this bit goes on top, so we cut these down. Now, to secure the top part, I have got here some heavy gauge florist wire. Once again, we light a candle, and now we have to put this wire into the underneath of the piece that's got the wick. 3 places again. Heat the wire. Push it in. And use tin snips to cut it off. It's always better if you do this in 3 different places, it just makes it more stable. Now we can push the wires straight down into there. Check it's as level as you can. If it's not, just move them. Don't worry about the foam, you're looking at this bit here. We're almost ready to go. Trim the candle. This time you're changing to a pair of scissors. Trim the candle just means cut the wick. Remember to save that piece of wick because you can use it again. And we're ready to add the flowers. From this point on, we are doing a French style, and so whether you're in the flower market, the florist shop or a garden, these are the things you're looking for. You're looking for colours that will go with the wax that you use, hence the Nerine and the Nandina, but also little interesting things that will give you texture and form. I found some green figs, some lily seed pods, some succulents, some agapanthus seeds, and some conifer cones. We place everything in 2s and 3s, and we're placing them so that they are not down here, but so they also take over a little bit of the candle. We want to create the illusion that this is a full candle and you've magically somehow added the plant material to it. I purposely picked succulents with very long stems on them so that they would go right in nice and deeply, and I am positioning them just randomly, really, right the way around. If you have a close look at those succulents, they've got tiniest little sort of red tinge on the outside of them, and of course that's also bringing the red out of the candle. So if you're buying for this, get a bit more, like chrysanthemums and things like that. They're going to take a while. Carnations, roses, they'll all look very, very cool when this is finished, and especially when that's lit. The next thing I'm going to do is add the nerines, and I'm taking them off. So we just got single little flowers in there, and because I haven't got many of them, just popping them here and there. It's almost identical colour to the candle. Now to the figs, the same wire that we used to attach the top, just push it into the fig. Oh, these figs are not ripe, that's why we know they'll last, they won't go rotten on us. And that's all you need to do, and then push it in. Put those in groups of 2, 3, and see how it's added just another form? Right. We'll carry on. So there they are. Just push straight in, and then the next thing we're going to do is these seed heads, and of course because they've got that lovely stalk on them, you can just push them straight in. They come in twos automatically. So we're getting smaller and smaller spaces. Very similar form to that, but because it's smaller it's still giving a contrast. So this is quite an exercise in contrast, especially when I picked everything that's in these green shades. Green is complementary colour of red, so it's always going to look good. There it is. You can just seeing all these different contrasts. Instead of the nerines, fuchsias even, carnations, all of the ones that you can get all the time, as long as they're little to go with this. And you can see now the illusion is really starting to happen of having a candle that somehow magically has got plant material in the middle. The next thing I'm going to use are these delicious seed heads from the agapanthus. Seed heads late summer are always really worthwhile, and of course they come with their own little stalk. Green again, another contrast, just a little bit shinier, and I'm filling in, starting to really just fill in gaps now. And then just a little bit of the Nandina picking up the red, and because it's got this lovely long stalk on here, I can pop it between anywhere where it's looking just a little bit too green. Just lift up whatever it is there and it will go straight into the foam. The other good thing about it is it's a really long laster. And there it is. Can you imagine that done with any colour now, any colour wax at all, and as tall as you wanted? You could even put another piece of floral foam on here and then another piece of wax on the top. You could really go beautiful and high. The possibilities are endless. This next design is going to be using up all these bits from the yellow candles I've accumulated over there, and we're going to make some wax bowls. Now if you haven't got Spheres Volume 1, you will not know how to make them, so I'm just going to take you back in history a wee bit to show you the method for making these wax bowls so you know what to do, and then we'll get straight on with the arrangement. But first of all, a bigger pot, the pieces go in, and we melt them all down piece by piece. Before you know about anything else, one balloon, one garden tap. Put the balloon over the connection that you'd normally have your hose to. Turn on the tap and fill up the balloon with water or as big as you want your floral sphere to be. I'm only going to make a little one. Take it off the tap, tie a knot in the top of it, tie the knot on it, you've now got a balloon full of water. Now it's all melted, I can grab the balloon and dip it in, and don't be frightened, it's not going to burst because that water is keeping it cold against the heat of the wax. I know it sounds impossible, but watch this. Take it right up, the wax is now at the very top of the pot, and pull it out. The more dips you make, the less fragile your little wax piece is going to be. The bigger the pot, the more wax, the further up you can go. You see how it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker. You can also use a paintbrush to dribble the wax onto it. So that's about 6 dips. I'm going to go for 10. Obviously the wax is getting less and less wax in the pot. This is another reason why we're working outside, because I'm going to get a very wet hand. And there it is. Isn't that astonishing? Translucent and beautiful. There are thousands of possibilities. One is you've dipped, you then add feathers, anything you want around it, and then dip again. You can use coloured wax crayon to pop into the wax so that it will dye into the colours you can want. You can dip it in 2 or 3 different colours, turning it from side to side. It really is the beginning of an astonishing journey where you go, where your imagination will take you. So there are the 4 yellow wax bowls I've made using exactly that method I just shown you. But come and have a look at a close look at what else I've done. I've also used a serrated knife to cut the eggs. Take obviously the yolk out and you end up with all of these lovely shells. I think there was half a dozen eggs there. On 5 of them I have put the wicks in, but all of them I have then used the leftover yellow wax just to pour them in random. This is just because it's going to be part of the design when we're finished. So now we've got all the elements we need to put the design together with the flowers. Flowers that are in season for our Easter are the last of the dahlias and the first of the belladonna lilies, which we call naked ladies. So they're going to work in perfectly well with this yellow colour scheme. Asparagus fern from the asparagus plant itself, but any light fern will do. Because the look of this is light and airy, the first thing you need is a large bowl. Pick white because it goes with the rest of the things I'm using, and it's a ceramic tray really. And another fabulous use of wax, it holds things in place. If you haven't been able to use this paraffin wax, you could use sand for the same purpose, but it's really, really appropriate, don't you think, to use wax if you have made the wax bowls. Scatter them around the base before you place in your bowls. The paraffin wax bowls that you actually saw me making outside in the garden is much, much stronger and sturdier than these ones made from recycled candle wax. Obviously a different sort of wax. You see I'm building up a little nest for that bowl so it's sitting comfortably in the container. So when I move the container, the bowl is not going to move. So if you've never done this before, I recommend practice with paraffin wax. Once you get used to the technique, then go on to recycled candle wax. now add the eggshells. The wick is way too long, so cut the wick down. So build them up as well, so they have their own little nest. The water, I always put it in very gently, just so that if these do move, you don't get water everywhere. Fabulous when you've been to the flower market and you've found some beautiful forsythia or something that's yellow, or spring, if you're doing this in spring and you have your Easter in spring. For us, our Easter being such late summer, it's very different what we can pick. So I have here the belladonna. Now on their own they're way too heavy, so I'm just going to cut some of the florets and lay them in. So it's starting to look really, really pretty already. Then we have the dahlia, short stem, and lay it in as a specimen. Doesn't have to fit right inside the bowl. It can be on the top to give it some depth. And the bowls don't have to be completely full of flowers, because then you're going to hide this beautiful form you've made with the wax there. Then to just pull it all over together to make it lovely and dainty. That's a candle there, so I can't lay that over that way. Just watch where your candles are. And as simple as that, you've got yourself beautiful little arrangement that takes no time at all. And what's very, very cool about this design is that when these flowers die, you just go and pop some more in. A pretty little design showing you 3 different techniques that you can use for wax. One as a nest to hold things in place, one to put into eggshells as a mould for candles, and one to use a balloon to dip into wax to create those bowls. I hope that's given you lots and lots of ideas. Done all these projects, the chances are you're going to end up with an annoying little bit of wax left that you don't need for anything. So here's a wee trick. What I do with my leftover wax, a really nice little vase I picked up from a second-hand shop, a charity shop, and using masking tape I have taped the wick down the bottom of it there, and leftover wax, pour it straight in there, and you have an instant candle. So no longer do you have an old candle that you can't use, you've rejuvenated with a new one. Give it a little stir like you did last time to get rid of the air bubbles, and if necessary, if the wick's not going to cooperate, just lean it like that and leave it for 8 or 9 hours, and you've got yourself a brand new candle. Easy. You can turn it into a lovely little gift for somebody, or a magical arrangement for a restaurant if you choose your vase wisely. Find one that's got this lip on it. It's really, really worthwhile to find it. What have I got? I've got conifer, succulent, and 2 ivy leaves. Now all of these are unbelievably hardy, and they will last for 2 or 3 weeks out of water. There's no need to do anything special with them. They're just that sort of a flower. So start with your conifer. Just take off these little pieces here, and just for convenience, just nip it off there. I found the ones with cones on it. Put 2 ivy leaves behind it. Contrast of form there. And then the succulent, quite hard, up against it like that. Just all pure green. You might have something yellow in your garden that will work with the yellow in there as well. Piece of decorative wire, a little loop for it. Put the loop up really high and then wind them all together as if you were doing a shoulder spray actually, but not the shoulder spray. I've left still these two ends. If I was wiring it in a normal way, I'd cut one end off. Now cut these all back so they're tidy and lay it on the rim with one piece of the wire going around the rim that way and one piece of the wire going around the rim that way. When you get to the other side, twist it. Use pliers if your fingers aren't nimble enough. Cut them off and just tuck that neatly under there. You can go back to your original little posy. Just tidy it up so it's sitting not too close to the wick. Cut the wick down and believe it or not, that's it. There is a lovely little candle arrangement that could be put in front of anybody's placing on at a wedding or an event, and it didn't take you long. It's using up old candles. Wax is not just something that burns candles, it's also a really cool mechanic. If you don't want to use floral foam, you want to use test tubes, but you want to keep it light and airy. What you're going to need, once again, some old candles. I've got here brown ones. The reason I've picked brown is because they're earthy. Some glass test tubes, short glass test tubes, and some sort of tray or container. And the container I picked was high enough so I can pour wax in it and it's going to hold those flower tubes in place. So off I go and melt down these old candles and then we'll put it all together. Now it's melted, just pour it into your tray as high up as it will go. Put a wee bit more in. It's got a wee centrepiece here. You may find one with a centrepiece or not. Okay, and then just for a little bit of fun, and there's a centrepiece there, I'm going to put a wee wick in there. It'll just hold it up. So if I want to, I can light a candle in that piece. Now I'm going to leave this wax for about 3 or 4 minutes till it starts to cool down, because that's when I'm going to put the test tubes in. It's been about 10 minutes, and when you just test it, you can see there's a skin on the surface. Just go around like this a little bit. It's still water inside, but if you're very careful and go down, you can twist those tubes in and they will stay in place. And of course, as the wax sets, it will hold them. And if it doesn't, a little bit of glue will do the trick. I'm not spacing them evenly. Spreading them around because I'm envisaging having all these very dainty vines and leaves and flowers, having the water source there. That lovely big candle in the middle. And the amount of test tubes you're going to use, it entirely of course depends on how big your tray is. So you saw the size of the two used candles I melted, so they have done this little tray, but at the same time over here I had that much left over, so they really went a long way. So this was just a glass, a vase that was in the spare room, and I'm going, that will look good as a candle. And I've rejuvenated, taken out of the 70s, and the wick wouldn't go right down to the bottom, so I have wound it round the skewer, and that pencil is just holding the wick in place until it sets. Once again, all this will take about 8 hours before I can start adding the flowers. It's a day later, and here they all are. I have had to add some carpenter's glue, some PVA glue into some of them because my dish was just a wee bit shallow. If you're going to do this, see if you can pick a dish that's perhaps an inch, 2.5 centimetres high, and it will keep them all in place. Because it is only 24 hours, you can still see that PVA is white. It will definitely dry to clear. But I wasn't waiting any longer. So the first thing we do is fill up the tubes with water. Trim the wick. And I have picked some beautiful bronze acer. It is just the beginning of autumn, so it's starting to turn this beautiful brown here, which is fabulous for bringing the colour of that base, that brown wax, up into the design. I want to keep it very, very light, so I'm going to take some of these off so that it's extremely airy and ethereal. And because I've added the bigger base around here, I can go out to the sides as well. The reason I've done it is it's so much easier for carrying it, and it just gives it a bigger space. And then some of the asparagus fern, once again taking off quite a few of these leaves so that it remains light and airy. You can see the dahlias that I've picked are very, very heavy. If I had smaller ones I would have used them. When you go looking in a flower market, you're looking, especially if it's spring, you're looking for all sorts of light things, jodquils, daffodils, anything like that. But it really is any season you can do this arrangement for. The bottom line is a cool way of holding up those flower tubes in the wax. And the tubes become part of the design. It's not something that you need to hide in any way. Using heavy gauge wire, just heat it up on the candle again and make a little hole in the wax. It melts it a wee bit, just enough to add a stem of that little maple. You can see it there, so that the base is also working really, really well. And because the wax is melted there, it is acting as if you dipped it in wax. So that's another technique for you, is if you're wanting to embed plant material in wax, very good with fine, long-lasting, for example, Nandina, things like that. And you'll notice I'm keeping the plant material well away from that wick, so when I light the candle it's going to have a lovely reflection on the glass, but it's not going to burn any of this plant material, because heat of course rises, so you can't have it going up and touching any plant material. And then to these two beautiful dahlias. I'm going to cut them so they go right to the bottom of the tube. And so that they absorb as much water as they can. The very last of the season. And it's as simple as that. It didn't take very long. It's very different. It's very natural. And there you have. Incredibly unique, never seen before in the world, except at your place and mine. It's been a day. Our leftover wax is well and truly set. The wick is in the middle. If you have a look, you'll see as the wax has cooled, it has gone into a hollow there, and that's because the stem of wax has dried and sucked that all in. So we trim the wick to about there, and we're left with a rather boring black candle. So what are we going to do about it? Well, of course, it's got to have plant material, doesn't it? And this is a wonderful thing for a wedding or a restaurant or a table for two if you're planning a romantic dinner, especially if you have made your own candle. It's just special. So I have got some variegated coprosma leaves because they go beautifully with the brown and they cheer it up a wee bit, you've got to admit that, and some copper decorative wire that also will give some shine against that dull brown. And we're going to make a garland. So just spend a minute or two cutting all of the leaves off. The reason I picked coprosma is because it's a really hardy leaf and it will last out of water for quite some time. Also that variegation works really well. So through the centre of the vein, push it through and start stacking. Next one, you can either have it facing a different way or even up the other way, and each way will give you a completely different look. Me, I like it a little bit uniform, so I keep all the stalks in one direction and them all facing the same way. If you face them in a different way, you won't need as many of them. You notice how they pack in there when they're like that. When they go this way, they actually sit against each other, and so it really depends on how many leaves. It is surprising how many leaves you're going to need, even for a tiny little project such as this. But of course you don't have to have them very close. Once I've put all these on, I can spread them out. As you're threading, just keep measuring the garland so you know when you've got it right round to the base. And I have done that, so we'll light the candle. Just going to use it as a heat source at the moment. Heat up the piece of wire. Because wire conducts heat very quickly, make sure you're not holding that wire too close, or you'll end up burning your fingers. That's just to heat it up, and then push the wire down into the wax, and that's just melted that wax just a little bit. Okay, so that's holding it in place, and now we just move these along a little way. Around. And around. When you get to the base, put your finger down fairly low and keep turning it so now the wire is encircling that base. And of course that's holding your garland in place. The leaves are a wee bit too long for the size of the stem, so you're losing that spiral effect. So you simply cut them smaller. And do this all the way down. And so you're getting a far more defined spiral. Because these are tough leaves, camellias will do the same thing. If you've got little camellia leaves, especially Sasanqua camellias. The cuts don't turn brown or anything. It's really quite cool. And giving it a much funkier look rather than looking just like a big mess. There you are. And now we're going to add a very special thing. This is quite a wacky idea that I caught up with on Pinterest, and I'm going, really? So we'll have a go at it and see what happens. You're definitely going to need the paraffin wax. It's got to be very white and very pure, so there's no point using recycled candles here. And heat up in the pot enough so the pot's probably 5 centimetres full of wax. I don't think I'm particularly fond of the technique, and I'm using a little dahlia, and there's enough wax in here to completely cover the head. Now the key is to twirl it, and by twirling it, all of the air that's being trapped is escaping. So you're covering the whole thing with wax, and then down inside for the stem, and then bring it up. And that's what it will look like. Don't put it onto a piece of greased paper. Put it into a little container so it can sit naturally. You've got to be quite gentle with it at this point. So it will sit in there and dry. Now this one here I did completely mucked up because the head was too heavy, so it broke it there. It fell onto the paper and it just squashed it. I mean, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? So you're going to have to experiment. I have seen the result of it done with roses. If you like the idea, because it does make them last much longer, experiment and see. 150 degrees is the key for your wax. The wax deep enough for the flower, and I would suggest you keep it to smaller flowers and roll it to get all of those little air pockets out. So we'll leave that to dry for a couple of minutes and then we'll use it. So the special things to add to this, to finish it off, are these preserved wax flowers. I'm not really sure if I like them. I'm sure there's better ways to preserve flowers. For example, putting them into silicone gel, and which is a powder, and covering them up with it and leaving them for 2 or 3 months, or freeze drying them. There's some beautiful ways now that you can preserve real flowers, but we'll go with this and we'll finish this off just so that you can see the process. I think that's the best one. I think that it actually preserved them very well, but they do tend to be a little bit weak on the stems, and because they're preserved, I've also dipped the stem into the wax. They don't need a water source, and because this is my best one, I'm going to put it at the top. So there it is. It's just tucked in there, and I have to say it does look quite cool, doesn't it? It just sits there, not too close to the candle. And now I'll select another one that I think worked really well, that one there. And I'm going to tuck that one through the wire here into the base. So it just sits, and tucked it into the base so it will sit rather beautifully like that. A third one. They're quite stiff now, by the way. I can touch them and not destroy them. They're amazingly stiff. But the stems at the top here are quite weak. So because the back is just a little bit plain, I'm going to add another one here by tucking it under the wire at the back. Give you a twirl, and by doing that it's become an all-round design. So it can be put in the centre of a table. Rather cool. Perhaps I've changed my mind. Perhaps I will do more of them. And there it is. 2 more wax techniques for you. Waxing flowers to preserve them, using up old candles and pouring them into a new container that you might have found in a op shop, a second-hand shop, to create a brand new decorated candle.